Hello, my name is Camden Busey, and I teach at Reformed Forum. We've been wanting to produce more resources to help people understand a confessional and reformed view of covenant theology, because we believe covenant theology truly is foundational. It really helps us to understand the whole scope of the Bible, of Scripture. So we don't believe covenant theology is an imposition on the Bible, but rather flows forth from it. In that sense, it's truly both biblical theology and systematic theology. Systematic theology is a discipline that looks to organize and understand the truth of Scripture topically, whereas biblical theology seeks to organize and understand Scripture in its redemptive historical context as it progressively unfolds, as Christ reveals himself through all of the events in Scripture. So we need both. In order to understand what God is doing in the Bible, we not only need to understand the big picture of everything God has done, but also understand how he is working and how he has developed his message and revealed it in successive stages through time. Now, we have a course available called Foundations of Covenant Theology. It's taught by Dr. Lane Tipton. It is a superb and an excellent course. But we also realize that there's a greater need perhaps, for more introductory materials that go through the nuts and bolts, the real basics of what covenants are and how they work in Scripture, how the Lord uses them to accomplish his purposes. So that's what this course is. We are seeking to teach some basics in covenant theology and to package them in a way that they're easily accessible and that you can engage them and watch them and learn in bite-sized chunks. So we're hoping to teach one basic idea, maybe in videos that are anywhere from 3 to 10 or 12 minutes long, and to put those online in a way that you can follow along, as well as to keep track of your progress. The first thing we really need to consider when we're considering covenant theology is the question, why? What is God doing? Not only what are covenants, but really, why does God use them? Why does God institute them? And the big picture, the big why question, really, for all of humanity, for every single person, is this: why did God create us? Why did he make us in his image? What is his plan? What is his purpose? Well, if you know the Westminster Shorter Catechism, it begins with the question, what is the chief end of man? Well, man's chief end is to glorify God and to enjoy him forever. So really, along those lines, we can consider what God's big plan is, what his big purpose is in terms of covenant theology in this way. God desires to bring humanity into a greater fellowship with him, into greater, higher, more glorious union and communion with him. He desires to bring those made in his image from the earth, the visible heavens, unto the heavenly places where Christ currently is, seated at the right hand of God in glory. In Isaiah, the prophet was given a vision of the Lord's throne room in Isaiah 6. Well, that's where the Lord is, but that itself is a created place. God made it in the absolute beginning, Genesis 1:1, and the goal has always been for human beings, his image, to move from the visible heavens and the visible earth to extend and to move on into the consummate realm of the heavenly places. And we see at the end of days, that will be in the new heavens and the new earth, as those invisible heavens come, and the new heavens and the new earth come to rest and really, in a sense, transform that which we see. So the big plan and purpose of God's desire to bring us into that glory needs to organize and govern all of our understanding of Scripture and what God is doing there. In other words, we need to understand that big goal, that big point, in order to make sense out of anything else that God does. God desires to bring humanity into a greater fellowship with him in the heavenly places. And he organizes and he mediates that relationship through covenants. Westminster Confession of Faith, chapter 7, section 1, says, "The distance between God and the creature is so great that although reasonable creatures do owe obedience unto him as their creator, yet they could never have any fruition of him as their blessedness and reward, but by some voluntary condescension on God's part, which he hath been pleased to express by way of covenant." So there is no time period after Genesis 2, at least, where the covenant of works was instituted, in which human beings are not in an express covenantal relationship to God. It's inescapable. You can't be outside a covenant with God. And even before Genesis 2, before God spoke the words regarding Adam and him not being allowed to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil upon the pain of death, and then Adam still existed in relationship to God because he was made in God's image. That's really important. All human beings are related to God, not like brother or sister, or genetically, so to speak. But we are related to him. We have a relationship with God because we're made in his image. We are made in the image of God, in the likeness of God. And so you cannot cease to be in some form of a relationship with God other than by ceasing to be human, by ceasing to exist, which is impossible. And so we are always in a relationship with God. But in the garden, God established a particular kind of relationship with Adam by establishing a covenant. We'll get to that in later lessons. So the big point is that we are in a relationship with God, but this relationship is going somewhere. God has a plan and a purpose. God desires to bring humanity into a greater fellowship with him in heavenly places. And he mediates and he organizes that relationship and its trajectory through covenants.